To both my guests here at Arcadia High School and those watching around the state and the country on mylivetvshow.com, welcome to PSAT Interpretation Night 2015. I will be your host, Rob Schwartz. Welcome everyone to tonight's event. Before we get started, I would like to start with a couple of very important special thank yous, beginning with the Arcadia principal, Dr. Brent Forsey. I'd like to thank the entire Arcadia High School counseling team for supporting this event. I would like to thank Keith DeLuca, the PAC manager, for making this happen. I would like to thank Furman Escobedo from AP Productions, who's responsible for the online production this evening. And I would like to extend a very special thank you to Terry Schreiner, who has kept the PSAT Interpretation Night speech alive for the 8 years that I have been giving it here at Arcadia High School. This would not have happened without her support. And to everyone on that list, my sincere gratitude. Let's go ahead and get started. Let me begin with a brief introduction. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here in your living room or in the audience in front of me? As I said, my name is Rob Schwartz. I am the Director of Community Outreach and a Territory Manager for the Princeton Review, which is a nationally known SAT and ACT preparation company. I'm also an independent college counselor with an organization called Premier College Guidance. To give you sort of my full story, I grew up not too far from here. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I went to Birmingham High School. Any Birmingham grads I have to ask? Are you out there? Are you watching live? I graduated from there in 1993. I went straight to UCLA, which I am proudly repping this evening. I spent 5 wonderful years being a Bruin, graduated with a degree in political science and business administration, and said, now what do I do with the rest of my life? And I put my life on hold because I really didn't seek out those answers. And I decided graduate school would be a great place for me to hide for a few more years before I took on any real responsibility. And I got into some good ones, and I couldn't afford them. I could not make the money work. So I picked my local Cal State University, which was Cal State Northridge, which I have a master's in U.S. and military history from, which you can see I'm using right now. Graduated from Northridge and said, now what do I do with the rest of my life? The biggest problem that I encountered, and it is probably the biggest problem I continue to encounter as a college counselor, is students are ill-prepared to understand themselves and what they want out of the college experience. So students, parents, take the time while it is still early in the process, and generally while these experiences are low cost or free, and start asking some really interesting questions. Who are you? What do you care about? What are you interested in? What excites you academically? Who do you see yourself being 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road? It will pay tremendous dividends. Trust me, figuring it out when I was in my mid-30s was not the right way to do it. I'm very happy being the person I am today, but there was a better way to do it, and I encourage you each to solve that problem. Who do I want to be? What do I care about? What fires me up? I have worked for a number of organizations outside of the Princeton Review you have heard of. I've worked for NASA. I've worked for Morgan Stanley. After completing my time with those organizations and getting into test prep 8 years ago, I found a unique grasp of an interest in college counseling as well, and I found a number of friends who do it for a living. They encouraged me to go through the UCLA counseling program, which I did a number of years ago, and I've been working one-on-one with families for now 5 years. That is my story. It's a good story, at least I think it is, and I hope it gives you a little bit of a greater understanding of the perspective that I come from when I share the information you're going to receive tonight. Let's start with the presentation. Is called PSAT Interpretation. That means I'm going to ask two things. Number one, I'm going to ask you to think about what does PSAT stand for? And the second thing I'm going to ask you to do, take out your score reports. First, we start with the letter P. What's it stand for? Audience members, any idea what does the P in PSAT stand for? I got about half the audience said practice, and half the audience said preliminary. Correct answer is preliminary. It simply means before, ostensibly, the SAT. It is not a practice test per se, although there are a lot of similarities between the PSAT and the SAT. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's start with how do we read this document? How do I interpret the information that is now in front of me? Let's start with the obvious stuff, which is listed at the very top of the document. There are 3 prominent numbers featured, running from left to right at the top of your PSAT report. The first number on the left is critical reading. The second number is mathematics. The third is writing skills. Each one is scored on a scale from 20 to 80. 80 is a perfect score. 20 is a theoretical minimum. The average is based on the year that you take the test. It is different between 11th graders and 10th graders. And for those in the room who are 9th graders, your averages are based on the 10th grade scores. If you look just below your scores, you'll see there is a simple bar chart immediately below it. That chart essentially says if you were to retake this exam, say tomorrow, without any additional preparation, what would you get on that exam tomorrow? The PSAT givers, the College Board, has estimated the guessing value of this test to be plus or minus 4 points. So if you scored a 50 in critical reading and you retook it tomorrow, your score should be somewhere between 46 and 54. Just below that line, you're going to see a number of shaded in or non-shaded in sort of ambiguous figures. The bigger the shaded area, the better you did versus your peers. In the example I'm looking at, a score of 50 in critical reading for this particular 11th grade student would equal that they had scored higher than 55% of the juniors in the United States. So these 3 measurements are saying how well did you do versus your national peers, which, to give you some sort of contextual number, it's approximately 1.5 to 2 million students a year take this test. Just below that information is another small box that says National Merit Scholarship Corporation. Now, this is a unique part of the PSAT. There are dollars tied to how well students perform on this test. Now, some important factors you need to know. In the 9th grade, National Merit Scholarship Corporation does not apply. In 10th grade, National Merit Scholarship Corporation does not apply. It is only in 11th grade that this particular section comes into play. Here's the deal. Yes, there is money tied to your scores, but you really have to be an outstanding tester. Now, I'm at Arcadia High School tonight, so I know there's a number of you in this room. The top 1.5% of all of the testers in the state, so this is a state-by-state competition, will receive a notification that they are a National Merit Scholarship semifinalist in a later point in time this year. Generally speaking, to be in the top 1.5% in the state of California, your score is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 224 out of a perfect score of 240. Now, to ask, well, what is my selection number? How do I arrive at that figure? You're simply adding critical reading, math, and writing together. They do it for you. It is called your selection index, and it's shown right below that section where the critical reading score is. Below that number will be the percentile scored versus the United States. How well did you do versus your peers in this competition? If it doesn't say 98 or 99, there's not going to be a direct money offering based on how well you did. Doesn't mean it's still not valuable. Doesn't mean we haven't learned something of value. Doesn't mean you won't earn money based on an SAT or an ACT score, which frankly is far more likely. But the PSAT competition is very, very tough. So just a quick show of hands. How many of you are holding a score of 224 or higher? I think 1 or 2 hands here. So those folks, they already know they're awesome, so they didn't come to this presentation tonight. Okay, if you're not in that range, do not freak out. Everything is going to be okay. Let's move on. The next section below is the Your Skills section. This is a pretty obvious piece of information. Each one of these bars that are shown says, how well did you do in a particular area of study within critical reading, math, or writing? The bigger the bar, the better you did. The smaller the bar, the more reason for you to go through and do a significant review if you're going to take the SAT either this year or the following year. Now, the one thing I would draw your attention to on the far left-hand side, underneath that header of Your Skills, there is something called an online access code. looks like a jumbled up series of letters and numbers like you would use to, launch the missiles or something, that code is really important for you, and here's why. The College Board has put together a personalized profile of your exam. All you have to do is log on to collegeboard.org/quickstart. Use this code, and it will provide you the answer that you provided, the answer that was correct if it's different, the level of difficulty on the question, why this particular answer was right or not. It is a study guide built for you. Here's the sad part. People talk about test prep being an unequal science and not everyone has access to it. I'm telling everyone here and watching at their homes, only 1 in 7 United States students will ever click on this link and use the code. 1 in 7. So guys, if you're thinking to yourselves, we can't afford SAT preparation, what steps can we take right off the bat to improve our scores and have a better understanding of what went right and what went wrong on this test? You are staring at the answer. Please humor me. Take advantage of this really, really good College Board program. It is a gem. Now, we pan down to the final piece on this score report, your answers. This is going to be a bit of a regurgitation of what you just heard, in that every single question, every single answer, every level of difficulty is provided for you. So understand that when you start to review your questions and you start to review your answers, you'll start to see there were some questions that were easy. These were the softball tosses you were meant to get right. That was the design of the test writer. There were another set of questions that were considered moderately difficult or medium. Ideally, this is where a bell curve is going to come into play. Some students are going to get all of them right. Some students are going to get some of them right. And some students are going to get none of them right. It's creating a bell curve of scores. Then there are the hard questions. Those are the ones that are intentionally written to be difficult or misleading. Not just to say we want to challenge students, but it goes one step further. We actually want, based on statistics, for certain students to miss these questions. Kind of evil, I know. Believe it or not, the name of the person or their title, the person who creates these questions, it's called a psychometrician. Sounds evil in and of itself, doesn't it? They get paid very, very big money to write questions that will mess with your children's heads. So if you're really evil and you're thinking you're a wordsmith or you're really good at math, you might want to look into this job at the College Board. Realize that on this current version of the PSAT, every single time you were wrong, your score went backward. Every time you tried and you failed, your score went down by 1/4 of a point. You were punished. We call it the guessing penalty in our industry. Every time you left an answer blank, you omitted a question, nothing happened. 0 points were awarded. Every time you answered correctly, you earned 1 raw point towards your total score. So there is a rhyme and a reason for how, when, and why we guess on tests like the PSAT and the SAT. Now, that is in its current version. Again, we will talk about the changes in a few minutes. But until these exams make changes, this is how these things work. You have to be careful about how, when, and why you guess on the PSAT and the SAT. You guys are welcome to put this away for a moment. We'll come back to it in a little bit. Now, part of the PSAT interpretation night issue is, all right, that's great, Rob. I understand the PSAT a little bit better. I have a score. So what? What am I supposed to do with this information? Well, there's a couple things you can do with it. The first is, let's have a clear understanding of how does a PSAT score turn into an SAT score. As I said before, 3 sections that are scored on this exam: math, reading, writing. The SAT in its current version, same thing. Each of these sections was scored on a scale from 20 to 80. All we're going to do is put a 0 at the end of each score to convert it to a current version of the SAT. So if you have a 50 in critical reading, you put a 0 at the end, voila, you have a 500 on the SAT in critical reading, which, by the way, is about the national average in that section. So if you simply look at your National Merit Scholarship Corporation selection index and put a 0 at the end of it, you have an approximate idea of how well you would have done if this was an SAT. with a couple of pieces of information accepted. The PSAT and the SAT are going to differ in three important ways. The first is simple length. The PSAT is a fairly easy to deal with exam. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes with proctoring time. That is not earth-shattering for anyone in this room. It has 5 sections to the test. The SAT, the Big Brother exam, is a little over 4 hours long when proctored. It has 10 sections. That is a much longer day. Considering you get about 13 to 14 minutes of breaks in that 4-hour-plus day, that's no joke. So parents, have a little bit of sympathy for your kids. This is not an easy task we put them through. Second, the level of math that is taught on these 2 exams varies just a little bit. The PSAT, the exam that the students in this room took this evening, focuses on arithmetic, algebra 1, and geometry, and that is it. There's no trig, there's no pre-calc, there's no calc. It's a fairly straightforward, simple test with the notion that it is not a straightforward intelligence test. We talked about the P in PSAT. We didn't talk about the SAT. Does anyone know what the SAT stands for? I hear a few mumbles, but no definitive answers. Parents, you may recall taking something called the Scholastic Aptitude Test. Does that ring a bell? For some, yes. That is what I took. That test died in March of 2005. It became the SAT-1 reasoning test. The SAT stands for nothing, which is an odd story in and of itself. What I'm trying to suggest is this is not a test that is actually measuring your ability to perform specific critical reading tasks or critical math or writing skills tasks. It's a measurement of how well you take tests. That is its biggest challenge. So there are plenty of students in this room who took this exam who I am comfortable saying are in trigonometry or pre-calculus or even calculus, who probably did not score that well on the math portion. It's not because they don't understand the math. The biggest issues they're going to encounter are A, they might have to go back 2 or 3 years to relearn the math that is applicable to this test. The second issue is the math questions themselves are not as straightforward and becoming as we would hope them to be. Many times those harder questions are going to intentionally lead students to wrong answers on purpose. So this is a very coachable part of learning how to take the PSAT and the SAT. The third major difference is in the writing skills section. Both have one. However, there is no essay on the PSAT. So in fact, there is no writing in the writing skills section, which makes no sense at all. What you took in this exam is a grammar test. That's all it is, plain and simple. On the SAT, the very first section in its current version is an essay you will have 25 minutes to complete. It is very, very formulaic in nature. Now again, there are changes coming. Now there's another test we have yet to mention, and it's very important that I do. When we talk about college admission, the PSAT has no bearing on the admission decision itself. So if you really like your score, that's great. It's not going to get you into the school of your dreams. If you really do not like your score, hey, guess what? That's great. It's not going to have any bearing on the admission decision. This is not a number that colleges are factoring in. They are going to factor one of 2 exams, the aforementioned SAT and an exam called the ACT. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the ACT? Very few. Well, let's discuss why that's the case. The SAT's base of operations is in the Eastern Seaboard. It's in New York. They also have a small satellite office in San Francisco. Where do they spend their marketing dollars? Left coast, right coast. So we, as Californians, have been inundated with SAT lingo and PSAT lingo for as long as we've been alive. That's the test we know and we trust. The ACT is based in Iowa City, Iowa, which is why you are not familiar with it. The majority of its marketing dollars, up until very recently, have been spent in the South and the Midwest. Obviously not California. So we're led to believe maybe this is not the best test for us in California. I beg to differ. 99.9% of colleges and universities in the United States today will accept either the SAT or the ACT equally. Now again, many of my audience members here are probably thinking, that's great, Rob, but we're in California, so it's SAT country, right? Nope, that is not how it works here, guys. The SAT and the ACT are accepted at every college or university in the state of California. Any school you can think of, Cal State, UC, Caltech, USC, Stanford, you name it, they will take both equally. So do not be afraid to expose yourself to both exams because they are very different tests. Let's take a moment to just talk briefly about what is this ACT. Unlike the SAT, it is far more academically driven in nature. If you're a strong student, you're taking IB or AP classes or honors classes and you're getting lots of A's, you will probably find some appeal towards this particular test. The negative here at Arcadia is its bent is in English and less in math. I will explain what I mean. The test itself has 4 main sections. It has an English section, it has a math section, it has a reading section, it has a science reasoning section. It has an optional essay at the end. Each one of those 4 areas is scored on a scale from 1 to 36. 36 is congratulations, you're a genius, you got everything right. 1 is you died 9 seconds into the exam, it was terribly tragic. A 21 is the national average. So that'll give you a very simple way of judging, am I good, am I not good, versus my national peers. 3/4 of this exam is based on your ability to perform English tasks. Now I know you're thinking, Rob, you just said English, math, reading, science. That's only 2. Not exactly. The English and the math and the reading are straightforward. No tricks. Show me what you know. If you know your stuff, you're good. If you don't, you got a problem. The science reasoning section, though, has no science in it. It is the most misleading of the 4 sections. It's the most like the SAT. And essentially, it is a reading comprehension section in the language of science. It's data interpretation. It's reading charts and graphs. Scientist X ran a climatological experiment in Barrow, Alaska, measuring the effects of global warming. Please read the responses to his work in chart 1.1 and 1.2 and answer questions 5, 6, 7, and 8 based on the charts above. It is a data interpretation section. So your biology and your chemistry and your physics experiences will not help you. As a matter of fact, they could actually abjectly hurt you to a certain degree. This is a reading section. So for those of you who are thinking, okay, so 1/4 of the ACT is about math. 1/3 of the SAT and the PSAT is about math. If you do not know the difference between 1/3 and 1/4, you should take the ACT. The ACT also does not suffer the guessing penalty. So it's either right or it's wrong. If you do not know the answer, you pick your favorite letter and you move on. Under no circumstances do you leave an answer blank. The biggest challenge that the exam provides is the length of the sections compared to the SAT. Unlike the SAT, which is 10 sections, but the longest section is 25 minutes. The ACT has those 4 main sections and the optional essay, the longest of which is an hour long. Your time management skills are put to the test. So if you struggle with reading and processing information, the ACT will be a bigger, tougher adjustment for you. But if you prefer English, you should be looking into this test. If you prefer math, you probably want to start with the SAT. But the best advice I can give you without knowing you is you should be exposed to both. Please humor me. Take a free practice test. A number of companies, not just Princeton Review, plenty of SAT and ACT preparation companies will offer you a free exam. Take them up on the offer. Find out what you're good at. I can't tell you how many times I've come across a student who said, look, I'm in California, I'm going to take the SAT, that's just what I know. And I say, humor me, please, do me a favor, just try the ACT. And we'll put the scores next to each other, and they're like night and day. A student who otherwise would be testing at the 15, 16, 1700 SAT level is scoring 28 or 29 on the ACT, which, comparatively speaking, is nearing a 2,000. That's a huge difference. That's a night and day difference. That's a huge difference in terms of where you can go to college and, frankly, how much money you might get for it. It's a whole other issue we forget about. As parents and as students, we get so concerned about how do we get into a good college. Is that a fair statement? Is that why we're here? Because we want to go to good colleges and we want to have good things for our kids and we want to have a good job and make good money. Is that fair? It is fair, yes, thank you. Guys, your test scores influence admission decisions to a certain degree. It is not the end of the world. It is not 50 or 60 or 70% of the admission decision. Nowhere in the country is that the case. It's more like 15 to 20, maybe 25% at the Cal States. Where it does have a direct effect is how much money those schools are going to offer you in merit-based aid. Your grades and your test scores are a direct link to money that could be in your pocket to pay your tuition. So realize there is a huge, compelling reason for you to treat these tests with the dignity and the respect they deserve, not just because they can help you get into college, but they can help you make it affordable. Trust me, I've seen it too many times in my time in this industry. Treat them with the respect they deserve. A small investment can go a very, very long way. Let me give you an example of what I mean. 2 years ago, I worked with a young lady who was in a school in Pasadena. I will leave the name of that school blank. She was taking the SAT because she was told that's what everyone else takes. She was clearly strong in English and not in math. She was good with the time management stuff, but didn't get the gamesmanship of the SAT. She took the SAT and she scored a 1560. She then invested, with her parents' help, $2,000 to get SAT tutoring in-home. To which I said, this is not a good idea. You should really consider maybe looking at the ACT. And she said, well, everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it. Her score went up 80 points. She was now a 1640. That basically was a $2,000 toilet flush you are hearing in your head right now. I said, look, do me a favor. One time, just try this ACT mock test. Just try it. If it's not better, I wasted 4 hours of your life. She humored me. She scored a 26. That's an equivalent of about an 1800 on the SAT with no preparation. I said, now humor me. Try it my way. Do the tutoring for ACT now. And the family sort of hemmed and hawed and said, well, it's another large investment, Rob. Are you sure we should do this? I said, if her score moves 3 points, you're going to get paid 10 times your investment. Family begrudgingly agreed. Her score went from 26 to 30 on the official test. She was admitted to 6 of the 8 schools she applied to, and her second choice school offered her $88,000 guaranteed over 4 years. Test scores do matter in the bigger picture, but not necessarily for the reasons you may think. So be cognizant of that as you guys move forward in your decisions to take an SAT or an ACT or both, and when or why to prepare for these exams. Now, I want to take just a minute to talk about the changes for the future. Because everyone here who's in 11th grade, everything I've said is exactly what you're going to deal with through the end of high school. But if you're here in this audience, or you're watching at home, and you are in 10th grade, you have a very different set of circumstances that I want to cover for you. First, the SAT is changing. As it did in March of 2005, it is radically moving. It is strangely going to look a lot like the current version of the ACT. Couldn't fathom why that would be. I can tell you, my professional opinion is the market share that was hugely in the favor of the College Board and SAT is now basically a 50-50 battle. For every student in the United States who takes an SAT, one now takes an ACT. And they really don't want to lose any more ground than they already have. Now, this test is going to change in March of 2016. So for those of you in 10th grade, the numbers that you are looking at right now on your PSAT scores should give you a very clear understanding of one of two things. A, You're really good at this version of the test. You're in the 90th percentile or higher. You're awesome based on where you are as a 10th grade student. You should probably make sure you take this version of the test before it changes. So that means you should be looking at November of this year, December of this year, and or January of 2016. That is the last chance you have to take this version of the SAT. Another part of the population here tonight is looking at their scores going, yeah, not so much. This was not what I was hoping for. Great. We now know your testing timeline is pushed back. You will not start this process until March of 2016 or later, but definitely start the process before the end of the junior year. Everybody got me? Based on your scores as a 10th grader, if you're really good, push your timetable up to take it the end of 2015 or the very first opportunity in 2016 before the test changes. Now, it doesn't mean you cannot try the new test as well. Colleges are very, very forgiving when it comes to standardized testing, and there's a reason why they do it. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and give you, at a minimum, the highest single sitting score. That's the minimum they can do for you. And the reason they're going to do it is because they're going to do the same for their own averages that they advertise to you. So when you're looking at College Board's website or U.S. News and World Report and you're looking at their average freshman incoming class results, wow, USC's incoming class has almost a 2100 SAT average. Well, how do they get that number? They will take every single SAT score a student submits, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you name it. Although I will tell you, by the time you get to 5 or 6, they want to know what's wrong with you. Isn't there something else you could be doing on a Saturday? But let's say you take it 3 times. They will do something called super scoring, which means they'll take the best math score from the 3 tries, the best reading score from the 3 tries, the best writing score from the 3 tries, and just add those 3 scores together. The Cal State system does the same thing with math and reading only. They will throw your writing score away. They do not use it as part of the evaluation. Only the UC system is so bold to say we will only take your single sitting best score. So do not be afraid to try these exams more than one time. There is always a benefit, even if your score goes down, to trying a second time. Now, I don't want you to be scared or intimidated by these exams, and that's the reason why people like me come out and encourage you to try these things in a mock setting first. So many families will rush out and say, go take the test cold, let's see how you do, and then let's fix what's wrong the next time. That's kind of like saying, gee, I have a math test coming up this week. I'm not going to study for it. I know I'm not going to do as well as I could. I'm going to wait for the teacher to give me back my B or my C or my D. Then I'm going to ask to retake the test after I study. Does that seem like a bad policy to you? Because it sure does to me. So use your time wisely. If you're going to take a test of this kind of magnitude, guys, do it with the intent that you want to get it right the first time. So do your preparation, do your legwork ahead of time. Generally speaking, that's 2 to 3 months prior to the test date that you want to take. Plan ahead. Now, you might be thinking, well, can I really plan ahead? Is that possible? Well, of course. The SAT is given 7 times every single year. It's not always on the same day, but it's always in the same months. Here is the list. October, November, December, January, March, May, and June. Every single year. The ACT is given 6 times every single year, just like before, same months, not always the same day. It'll be given in September, October, December, February, April, and June. And for those thinking, there were several months you mentioned where they're identical. That's correct, but the test will never happen on the same day. So you could, in fact, take the June SAT the first Saturday of the month, and then the next Saturday take the official ACT. That is perfectly normal, perfectly healthy. Your job is to look at the available test dates, figure out when are you busy, when do you not have the time to do these things, pick dates that do make sense for you, and plan accordingly. As an example, If you are in 11th grade right now, and I know here at Arcadia AP classes are a rather common occurrence, if you're taking more than 2 AP classes, you should not be taking the May SAT. You have other more important things to focus on, namely doing really well on your AP exams in May. So decide now if you want to push your test date up and take March, push it back and take June, or hopefully you test it earlier in the year and you can retest maybe at the start of the senior year. But do this with a sense of, I'm not going to make my life hell. I'm trying to make this as easy and pain-free as possible. And if there are people here or those watching at home who have questions about that, reach out, contact me, contact Princeton Review, contact your college or guidance counselor. Ask for some help. We are glad to help you make these decisions. This should not be hard and it should not be painful. I want to take one big step back. I want to take a step away from testing for a minute, and I want to try to give some context to why does all of this stuff matter? Why should I care about SAT or ACT or anything else for that matter? Why should I care? And frankly, what are the things I should be paying attention to as I make my way through high school? When we talk about college admission, there are 7 key factors you guys need to be aware of. Feel free to write these down. These are important. You should get to know them, and I will explain them in greater detail. In descending order, from most important to least important. Number 1 is curriculum. Are you guys taking challenging classes? Are you pushing yourselves academically? Now, do not mistake that to mean, are you taking 6 or 7 AP classes? Have you tried AP lunch? You ate 8,000 calories in 30 minutes, but you got a B because you couldn't keep the food down. That is not what we're talking about here. You want to be selective about how many AP classes and which ones. And that's based on what are you interested in. Again, we're coming back to this notion very early on about what fires you up academically. Are you a math science student? Do you really get excited about the idea of working as an engineer or a biochemist? Great. You better be taking the AP calculus before you leave here. You better be taking the AP chemistry, the biology, the physics. Challenge yourself in the areas you are driven to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. If that is the bane of your existence, if you enjoy poetry and you enjoy literature and you enjoy the frivolity of philosophy, I really don't want to see you in AP chemistry just so you can get beaten up enough to maybe get a B and ruin 2 or 3 other classes and learn to hate school. Take the classes that fire you up and inspire you. But if you're not pushing yourselves academically, you're making a huge mistake. Second on the list is the obvious one, your grades, your GPA. How well are you performing in the classes you elected to take here at Arcadia or wherever you might be watching tonight? The big thing we get sort of stuck on is this notion of, well, what is my UC GPA, my CSU GPA? A private school is going to count it a couple different ways. I don't know exactly where I am. Don't freak out about this. A 1/10 of a point here or a 1/10 of a point there is not going to make the deal breaker in a yes or no decision, guys. It just isn't. If you're in the ballpark, you're doing your job. Do the best you can do, and if you can look in the mirror and take a good look and say, I am doing the best I can do, that's enough. You will be just fine, I promise. Number 3, test scores. When I say test scores, I'm including more than just the SAT and the ACT. I'm including 2 other things. I'm including SAT subject tests, and I'm including AP exam scores. SAT subject tests, for those who are not familiar, these were required by the UC system up to, I believe, 4 years ago. And it was deemed a barrier for students in the low socioeconomic areas of the state. And they said students weren't even taking these exams, they didn't know about them. And so otherwise qualified kids in inner cities weren't being evaluated for the UC system at all. They got rid of it as a requirement. However, there are still 12 schools in the United States. The only one in California that is a requirement is Caltech. everyone's favorite party school. If you're thinking you are that math science whiz and you really want to be at a very, very small, very focused engineering-specific school, you need to take SAT subject tests in Math Level 2 and a science that best corresponds to the area you wish to study. Stanford got rid of the requirement, I believe, 3 years ago. They still strongly recommend them, though. The UC system, there are a number of them that still recommend, and in certain programs, mainly in engineering, strongly recommend that you take Math Level 2 and a physics or a chemistry. So be aware that there are a number of schools where this is still going to be important for you. Do your research and check on the exams that are available for you that are appropriate based on what you wish to study. Now, knowing my population here at Arcadia, there's another one I want you to pay very close attention to, which is the foreign language exams that are offered as part of the SAT subject tests. Chinese, Korean, Japanese are all offered. I would think at least half the population in this room can take one of those exams and do extremely well. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. That could save you a lot of time, energy, effort, and money because it may actually get you out of a language requirement at a college or university. With the average cost of a single class in the modern era being between $1,500 and $3,000. If I could get rid of a couple of classes by taking one test that took 1 hour, I would think that's a pretty shrewd move. So again, for those of you who are strong in foreign language, please look into the SAT subject test that matches your ability. The last exam is the AP test, and I call this the best financial aid tool that a student controls. Why? The great majority of the colleges and universities in the United States today, if you pass an AP exam generally with a 4 or 5 out of 5 points, will award you general education credit towards your degree. That's one fewer class you need to take at an expense of $1,500 to $3,000 a class. You do the math, you start taking the number of AP exams that you've completed here, you could skip an entire year of college just based on doing what you do in high school. So for those of you who are passing an AP class here on campus or watching at home, and you're thinking, I don't really want to spend the $80 or $90 or $100 to take the test, do not be an idiot. Spend the money to take the test, work hard, study hard to score at least a 3, pass the exam, and you may save yourself thousands of dollars towards the cost of college. Because I have news for every single person sitting here and watching at home. Guys, getting into a good college is not nearly as hard as you think it is. Paying for it is hard for nearly everyone watching. Parents, you should not be up sweating at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning going, how am I going to get my kid into a good school? You should be thinking, how the hell am I going to not manage to work an extra 5 or 10 years into my retirement to help pay for it? That's a whole other matter. Again, remember, standardized tests can affect dollars and cents. Once we get away from this notion of numbers, we get into number 4 and number 5 on the list. Number 4 are college entrance essays. Now, these are not required by all schools in the country, but generally speaking, the more selective, the UC, the Stanfords, the USCs, the Caltechs, very much do. And they're interested not just to see your ability to write and your grammar and your syntax. They're trying to establish, who are you? What do you care about? What are you interested in? Why are you a good fit for my school? What are you going to do while you're here that I should get excited about? And part of that ties into number 5, extracurricular activities. If you're thinking, I don't have time for extracurricular activities because I have 5 or 6 AP classes, you just found the big mistake of your ways. Because you will find your curriculum and your grades and your test scores will probably not be enough to get into the schools you think you are qualified to go to. They are looking for more than just numbers in the American college and university system. They're looking for people with passion and drive and intellectual curiosity. And if your extracurricular activities are not fostering that, you're making a mistake. So take the time while you can, while still in high school, to ask yourself, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to learn? What do I really want to study? And take some perhaps uncomfortable steps to a job shadow, to an internship, to a job, to an externship, to a summer program at a college or university that specializes in a particular class. Take the time while you can to find out what you really are interested in. Because guys, you can do it the right way or you can do it the way I did it. And my light bulb went on when I was 34. Here's the difference. When I went to college, big deal. The advice I was given was, Rob, get into college, figure out who you want to be, and then you'll graduate. That's back when UCLA cost me, gosh, I don't know, what seemed like $10,000 a year. That's nothing. Guys, with the increases in the UC system that are now budgeted 4 years from now, 1 year at UCLA will be $40,000 a year before financial aid. That's crazy. 4 years, $40,000 a year, that's $160,000 to go to a UC school. Are you getting why this stuff could really make a difference in your life? If we're talking about the UC system, that's where we draw the line, those 5 items. If we start talking about smaller private colleges and universities, we're going to add 2 more. We're going to add letters of recommendation, and that, guys, is about building relationships with your faculty members in particular, especially in 11th grade. A great letter of recommendation is going to talk about the type of student you are in class. Were you the type of student who raised your hand? You asked interesting questions. You did interesting work. You challenged the instructor in a good way. You challenged your other classmates to do better work. Were you the student who, before winter break rolled around, walked up to your teacher in U.S. history class and said, you know, that was a really, really interesting story you told about the start of World War II. Is there a book or two that you can recommend that I can read over winter break that would allow me to dig a little bit deeper? I know that it's hard to believe. Students actually do read for their own benefit over winter break. If they want to go to places like Stanford and Harvard, that's what they're doing. They are intellectually curious people. So take the time to show your faculty and your counselors to a lesser extent that you are that interesting person. If you're getting A's in everything, but you're simply sitting at the back of the room executing a learning plan, you are not going to get a great letter of recommendation. If we come back to that idea of Caltech, by the way, where the average class size is what? 14, 15 students? And there is an expectation that you will ask questions and you will discuss things with your classmates. And you are the person who sits at the back of the room and simply executes a learning plan, they're never going to admit you. I don't care if you've got 20 APs and you've got 5s on all of them. There are no AP classes at Caltech. There are no AP classes at an Ivy League school or a UC school. They're looking for interesting people who do interesting things, who will challenge and motivate other members of the faculty and the student body. So pick your battles carefully. You do not have to be a rock star in every single class that you are in, but you should, in 1 or 2, build a strong foundational relationship with a faculty member who can say some nice things about you. And finally, number 7. Again, this applies to smaller private schools in particular. I call it demonstrated interest. This is about a 2-way street. This is about you as a student understanding what you are buying as a consumer. Did you take the time to meet that particular representative from Santa Clara University when they visited Arcadia High School? If you were at the local NACAC College Fair in Pasadena, did you get a business card from the admission rep who was there after having a nice conversation with them? Did you follow up with them? 1, did you send them a letter of appreciation, letting them know you appreciated their time, that you really learned something of value about their institution of higher learning, and that you really feel you might be a good fit there? Did you make an official visit to the campus? Guys, there is not an expectation that you should get on a plane and travel 3,000 miles to schools in the greater Boston area, and if you don't do that, you're not going to get in. That's not how it works. But there are a number of small private colleges that are in driving distance from here, that if you do not get off your duff and go see them, the answer is going to be no, even if you are a genius. Even if you glow in the dark, you're so awesome. The answer is going to be no. The Claremont Consortium of Schools, for instance, very much wants to see you make an official visit. We're talking about 5 of the best schools in America, less than an hour and 15 minutes from here. And if you're thinking about applying to one of those schools, and you do not make an official visit, how much do you really care? I would very clearly say you don't. Or you're a fool, in which case, why would I want you on my campus anyway? You're going to spend, before financial aid, $60,000 a year over 4 years for a world-class liberal arts or engineering education, depending on which school you pick. And you never drove the hour and 15 minutes to see what it's really like? You gotta be kidding me. So take the time to investigate, at a bare minimum, ladies and gentlemen, one small college or university. The closest one here is Occidental College in Eagle Rock. What is it, 12 minutes from here? Guys, make an official visit. Go see what it's like to have 2,000 students on campus. Go visit a medium-sized campus. One that I would recommend would be, say, Loyola Marymount University on the west side, about 6,000 undergraduate students. Beautiful campus. Go see what that is like. Then go see a large school like an SC or a UCLA and see what that is like. You'll start to find one of those 3 does not suit you. That is not your learning environment. That's not the place where you're going to get the most bang for your educational buck. I don't care what the sign on the outside of the school says. It's what you're going to learn inside its walls that truly matter. Now, there's another really interesting thing that I may have shared with some of you once before, but for those watching at home, I doubt you've heard this one. I recently read a book that talked about the most valued CEOs in the United States of America. These are the men, and I don't believe there's any women in the top 10, I believe they're all men, who earn the most amount of money for the most reputable organizations the United States has to offer. These are the Apples, the Coca-Colas, the General Motors, the General Electrics. These are the firms you guys use on a daily basis. Even if you don't know it, you are. And I took a look to see where did their CEOs get their bachelor's degree. And I was expecting Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, you name it. These are billionaires, guys. University of Kansas, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Texas Tech University, University of Dayton. These are all ringing endorsement schools. These are all top 10 schools, right? These are all billionaires who started at these respective schools. So, of the top 10, 1 did in fact go to an Ivy League school. He went to Dartmouth. Go figure. What I want you to be aware of is the amount of money that you're going to make on this journey has almost nothing to do with where you get your bachelor's degree from. So what does it have to do with? 2 factors. Factor number 1, what did you major in? Because I got news for you guys. If you major in petroleum engineering at the Colorado School of Mines, you're going to graduate and make $100,000 a year. And most people in this room have never heard of the Colorado School of Mines. It's one of the best engineering schools in the country, by the way. If you go to Harvard and you major in social justice and you are likely to be a social worker, you are not going to be a wealthy person. Social workers don't make a lot of money by trade. I don't care where you went. Short of you now represent the cabinet for the President of the United States, you're probably making $35,000, $40,000 a year. The second value is where you get your final degree, your advanced degree, your MBA, your PhD, your MD. You can pretty much draw a line across the board and say, I went to a top medical school, I get big bucks. I went to a top 10 program, I get top 10 money. I went to a bottom half, I'm looking for a job, I may be a barista for the next year. That's across the board, law school, med school, dental school, business school, you name it, guys. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have to go to one of those premier institutions of higher learning to get into a premier institution graduate school. As a matter of fact, Cal State University Northridge, fine fighting matadors of CSUN, had not 1, but 2 of their recent BA or BS graduates admitted to Harvard Medical School this year. There are only 165 spaces in the freshman program at Harvard. 2 of them went to CSUN grads. Guys, it is not where you start, it is where you finish. Realize that if you are happy, you are healthy, you are comfortable, you are well adjusted in the school that you pick, you will do better than if you are not, regardless of the name. So think very carefully about this. Now, I know there are some cultures that would disagree with me, that they have a child who is at Harvard, therefore they get more business. Those are few and far between examples. I'm telling you from 8 years of working in test prep and 5 years of working as a college counselor that for the majority of Americans that simply doesn't hold water. Realize there is a bigger picture out there. Now, along the lines of this term, good college, I'm curious. I'd like you to think for just a moment, how many good colleges are there? Take 1 minute, no, take 10 seconds. How many good colleges are in the United States of America? Think about it a couple of seconds, and I'm going to ask you, just by show of hands, to reveal your answer. All right, time is up. If you believe there are more than 100 good colleges in the United States, please raise your hand. More than 100. Those watching at home, about a third of the room raise their hand. Who would say there are 50 good colleges in the United States? Just 50. Fewer number. How about 10? 10 good colleges in the United States. Okay, you guys are on to the trick here. First, how many are there? Have you ever taken a moment to think, how many colleges are actually in the United States? Approximately 2,300 four-year schools grace this country. It is one of the few things this country hasn't screwed up yet. Thank God. We screw up a lot of stuff in this country, make no mistake. Education is still one of the few things where the world looks to us as a leader. That's also part of the problem with getting in. We perceive it to be very hard to go to good colleges. Part of the reason is there's never been such an onslaught of international candidates who want to get into places like Berkeley and USC and UCLA and Caltech and Stanford in our history. So we have that problem to deal with. But by and large, guys, find places where you can be happy and healthy. And whether that is you're a California or bust kid, or you're willing to go to the Midwest or the South if the education and the major is right, do what feels good and realize that you need to have a diverse list of schools. And when I say a diverse list of schools, that does not mean go out and apply to 37 colleges. If you are my client and you apply to 37, I will drop you as a client. I do not want to be on the cover of the New York Times. The Abomination of College, brought to you by Rob Student. Generally speaking, a good college list is going to consist of about 12 colleges. A few of those schools that, gosh, it'd be really great if I got in, but the odds aren't so good. A couple of colleges at the back that we consider safety schools. That does not make them bad, by the way. That means they're easier to get in, but it doesn't mean that they're not as good as the ones at the front of your list. And the majority are ones we would consider a target school or a reasonable fit school where your numbers and your abilities match up fairly well with the students who were admitted in the past year. You need to have all three represented. If only for having those safety schools to say, I know I'm going to have some academic choices, and hopefully I'm going to have some reasonable financial aid offers because I am a good student compared to the average here, they're likely going to have to throw some more money my way to get me to say yes. Understand, at the top of the food chain, they don't have to give you $1. The sound of merit-based aid at Harvard sounds like this. We let you in, congratulations. Now pay us. Unless it is a need-based aid, do not expect aid from places like Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Brown or Stanford. It's just not there. Because everyone is a genius, everyone is near perfect. You guys will find that these are very real very difficult decisions you will have to deal with. I worked with a student not too long ago from Arcadia High School. He applied to 12 schools. He was admitted to 10. And at the end of the day, he had to reconcile, Rob, do I go to